Arsenal seem poised to take sporting director from major Spanish giant. What could possibly go wrong? This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, Blackman, Twitter, and Gunner. Voice is just ever so slightly froggy from what is always a special time, getting together with people from the ArsenalVision Podcast community. So some of the Disco Boys out in Vegas, along with Matt Giant Gunner, who I guess is a Disco Boy / podcaster for us on all things finance related. And just a generally lovely human being. But we had a great time. And it is sort of a reminder that while this is a podcast, it is maybe more than anything just a community of wonderful Arsenal people. And every time I get together with them, I just feel so filled with joy and rewarded by the sensational people that are there. There was one person there that I didn't like. Everybody else was great. I'm not going to say who the person is I didn't like. Obviously, that would be rude. They'll just have to wonder if it's. I'm kidding. Can you imagine like having to be like, am I the one? Actually, the person I didn't like is me. I'm just filled with self-loathing. Wherever you are, I hope you're doing well. Hope you had a great weekend. We did do karaoke deep into the night. And if you want to know what the playlist was, you can certainly reach out to me and I can give you some of the highlights. I will tell you that Pink Pony Club made an appearance at one point, as did some Metallica, though. We hit all the genres. We got a good weekend, I think. A good week, I should say, of content. Tomorrow, Phil and I are going to power rank the remaining clubs in the Champions League. So you'll have that before the game, and then you'll have an instant reaction after the game. So Champions League power rankings for patrons. I'm trying to line up a special guest that I'm working on to go deep into the Andrea Berta links as sporting director, someone from the Atleti sort of world who can give us more in-depth analysis of him and his CV, but we will be discussing him on today's pod. We'll talk a bit of FA Cup. And of course, the majority of today is going to be spent previewing the PSV tie. So that's what we've got lined up for you. It feels pretty massive. Let's be honest. It seems like a massive moment. But yeah, I have to say, and I don't know if this is a sign that they've just overloaded us with football. Most of the people I talked to this weekend really enjoyed that there was no Arsenal this weekend. Really enjoyed the break. And I don't mean that. I'm not saying that jokingly or haha, we stink. Nothing like that. Just I think people genuinely enjoyed a bit of a break just to take a deep breath because it's been going so long, so hard, so fast. Might want to rephrase that in the edit, but we'll see. Anyway, you get the idea. And I'm curious to hear if Clive and Tim feel the same way. So hello, Clive.
Hello.
Yeah. Did you need the reset? I feel like I kind of needed the reset a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not to reset. I do different things. I go and watch non-league. So I was watching Berkhamsted versus Leverstock Green on Saturday. I watched Slough versus Chippenham Town on Tuesday. And so, yeah, that just gets me sort of like, reminds me of the world outside of Twitter and outside of various programs on the YouTube telling us how bad we are. You just got to get perspective and go wherever you got to go to get that, you know. And so that has been my week, really. And then lastly, into the women's game at the weekend, you know, and that was a distraction. And Tim will no doubt go into that now. That was a fantastic watch. So yeah, it sort of refreshes your mind. And then of course now you're back into the training YouTubes this morning. And we're off again, aren't we, for Eindhoven?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Tim, I think first of all, hello, welcome.
Hello. Well, thanks, by the way.
Look, I know that you didn't have a reset per se because you were still, you know, watching and working the Arsenal beat with the women having a dramatic win over West Ham. But in terms of the Arsenal men, of course, I would like to still be in the FA Cup, and that would have been a lovely weekend. But it really felt to me like a break wasn't the worst thing in the world. And I just wonder if, you know, look, if Arsenal had been on, I would have watched it. I would have been invested in it. I would have been super into it, of course. But it does sort of make you wonder if they're squeezing this lemon a little too hard, you know, to get the last bits of juice out of it. Because when no Arsenal over the weekend felt nice, I don't think that's a great sign for the football calendar. Like, I've never felt that before, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I think adding those Champions League games in January, and if you look around the Arsenal ticket exchange, those are the games that go. Like, It's funny, really. We talk about the prestige of the Champions League and all that, but actually those are the tickets that are the easiest to get. Don't get me wrong. If we get through to the next round, that's Real Madrid, they won't be doing it on the ticket exchange, but those kind of group games, those January games. And it's funny as well because they add these games like for extra revenue, but nobody wants, I've heard it called the punishment round. Like, no one wants to finish outside the top 8 and get that punishment. Like, none of the clubs are thinking, "Oh, 2 extra games there. Let's finish 9th." I think, though, with the quote unquote reset, it has a few values. Has values for us as Arsenal fans because it's been so intense. I don't think that I didn't see a lot of, "Oh, I'm really missing it." Obviously it has huge value to the team. They need this period to work out what they're doing.
Yeah.
And particularly for PSV, it's given them a good run up to try and work something out and try and come up with maybe something a bit different and get some of those partnerships going. I think more widely as well, what happens is like the content takes a break, even regardless of whether you're in the FA Cup or not. There are certain outlets that don't show the FA Cup. Therefore, there are certain outlets that don't do programs or podcasts about the FA Cup or anything like that. It almost feels international breaky.
Yeah.
And I think the content machine calms down a little bit. And in England, a lot of those games are on terrestrial TV, which actually, bizarrely, despite the fact that means it reaches more people, somehow it's not quite as... Like, if you got a game on ITV, you get 10 minutes build up, you get 10 minutes afterward, and everyone's out of there, kind of thing. And so the content machine, I think, calms down a bit. And I think that, as much as anything, is responsible for maybe some of us feeling a bit weary at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's fair as well. I mean, the funny thing is, it almost had the feeling to me of like the Premier League season ended. Because with the draw at Forest and with Liverpool winning, we now know, if we didn't already, which we may have already, we're not going to be champions. We also know we probably don't have much jeopardy this season. There may be a few of you negative Nellies out there who think we can drop out of the Champions League places, but we'd have to drop to 6th, and I think that's unrealistic as well. So it's weird that this break coming right after kind of knowing our fate almost feels like it was drawing a line under the Premier League season. And now the focus, of course, shifts to the Champions League for as long as we have that available. We're going to preview PSV. And we're going to talk FA Cup even a little bit because I think it was some fun stuff over the weekend. But I think we should cover a little news, Clive, because Fabrizio Romano has gone out with, as well, other people, that it looks like Andrea Berta will become Arsenal's sporting director later this month. He comes from Atletico Madrid. He was a banker. He then changed his career to football, worked for some clubs in Italy, and then moved to Atletico Madrid in 2013 as an international scout. And then as his influence grew, he was promoted to sporting director. They won La Liga titles while he was there, a Europa League while he was there, a UEFA Super Cup while he was there. He did oversee some very big signings, notably Antoine Griezmann, Jan Oblak, Rodri, Luis Suarez, João Felix for 126 million euros might be one we want to talk about. Obviously generated some major sales for them, as well as them just being a club that competed with the Giants while he was there without necessarily being quite the Giant themselves from a resource standpoint. In 2019, he was awarded the Globe Soccer Award for Best Sporting Director of the Year. Clive, what's your reaction to him coming into focus as the primary candidate and the likely appointment?
Well, I didn't know his name until about a week ago, so
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend that I know everything about every sporting director walking around Europe.
He does, by the way, just so you don't feel bad about that, his Wikipedia page is Andrea Berta was sporting director at Atletico Madrid from 2017 to 2025.
Yeah.
It's one line. I've never seen anything like it.
So what I care about with this is, I think Arsenal are due a mini reset. I think they're due some more outside knowledge coming into the team. They can decide where that is. When I say team, I mean, I should say club. More outside proprietary knowledge, expertise coming into the club to make us stronger. That's what I care about. The only thing that excites me about this is not the person, because I don't know the person. He seems like it doesn't take long to do a quick search and find out he's strong. And you can do a little 2+2 and say, well, he's worked with Simeone, so he must have something about him personality-wise. You look at those signings and you think, oh, that's really quite interesting. They never seem to have the dud signings so prominent in all these reviews, but let's not go into that. But what I do like is if you were to look at Arsenal, maybe from the outside, particularly the way we're perceived right now, if there's a club that we're closest to in identity, it's probably Atletico Madrid. Mm-hmm. We've got a moody, temperamental, highly highly obsessive, disliked by the mainstream media manager that can't sit still in his technical space. He gets up and down. He's a bit passionate. He hasn't done anything. Who do you think he is? Talking about football, talking about the ball even. Who does he think he is? You know, like we got this guy that absolutely would do anything to win a game of football. And if you look at Diego Simeone, he's actually quite similar. He literally is obsessive about the details, about what he wants to do. So you look at it from an identity point of view. I like the fact that we're leaning into who we are. If this is true, Elliot, depends what Twitter accounts you follow. If we're leaning into that a bit more, we're going to go full Arteta, and he's going to start wearing black shirts. I'm all for it, mate. I tell you now, I'm all for it. At least I know what we're doing. At least I know who we are. So all the slaughterings we get, at least I'm thinking, well, yeah, get used to us because we're not going anywhere. Atletico Madrid got to, was it 2 Champions League finals?
I believe that's right.
Yeah.
One
and
comes
they're
to
unlucky
mind.
to lose one for definite, you know, and they dominated them. So if we're operating at that level, I'll deal with that. I'd love to see that. So yeah, if we're going full black shirt Arteta, if this guy helps us do it, and we're going to get some gnarly, none of these fancy down number 8s, Elliot, some blokes with long studs that take people out on the neck, I'm there for it, mate. As long as we are who we want to be. But the most important thing, joking aside, what's really important, and this is something that we should have a conversation about, is it was a surprise Nedu left. Because it's the first time I've seen in a long time that we had some disalignment, right? And the number one thing is alignment again. That's what I want to see. So we're not wasting cycles deciding which player is we want to get, that player, and arguing about it. Because we're already aligned, we go and get the people that we all agree with. Now, see, alignment makes us more efficient, makes us much more resource efficient. That's what I want to see. If this is the guy, there are smarter people than me that can say he's the best one.
Yeah, I mean, I like a few things here, right? I mean, I like that he worked his way up from a small Italian club to a bigger one in Parma and then made his way to Atleti, but had to be in the international scouting department. You know, he wasn't just like Raul, I think, was at Nike and then was pretty prominent in football, you know. And the only reason I bring up Raul, by the way, of course, is, you know, when we think of sporting directors, we think of Raul and we think of Edu and the difference in their career paths and how they came up, how they were trained in football. I think Berta had to work his way up to prominence, to a position of authority. I do think you're right, Clive, that I see some relationships between Atleti and Arsenal where they're analogous in some ways. You know, Arsenal are a giant English club, of course, and we have huge resources. But when you are competing with spending like Chelsea and City, for example, we're not going to do that. I think it's fair to say. You have clubs like United that are bigger financially. We're more in the Liverpool mold, I think you would say, both in terms of how our ownership approaches us and things like that. And so we have to operate a little smarter, you know. And again, I want to be careful. It's not that we can't spend. We're not Brighton. We're not Brentford. But we do have to be smarter than like a Chelsea or a United. And thankfully we have been. I think Berta fits that mold. And if you look at what Atleti have done, staying right there in touching distance to a Barca and a Madrid all along the way. But, and this is critical, not by buying unknowns, right? They have gone to big price tags for players. I mean, you might not love that they spent 126 million euros on João Felix, but they did it. They bought Luis Suarez, right, when he was a known star. And he helped them win La Liga. You know, they went for big players. They bought Antoine Griezmann. So they have made statement signings. And importantly, by the way, statement signings where? In the attack. Suarez, João Felix, Antoine Griezmann, right? There's some big acquisitions there. And there may be no more iconoclastic manager in football than Simeone. And so if you can work with a Simeone to find players that fit his style, but also make sure you get the business done, then I think you can work with a Mikel Arteta. And I think it feels like an appointment that for a lot of reasons makes sense. As I said, we're going to speak to an expert on that later this week, probably Wednesday for Patreon. But Tim, I don't want to get off the topic yet without giving you your say. So I have to say I wasn't as excited about Alabe. Jason Ato could be the next big talent in football, but I'd like a new voice in the room for a little while. So this really fits for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you on that. For example, Arsenal have done a lot of like internal promotions, and I think that's absolutely fine. But I think there comes a point where, you probably need a fresh perspective. And it's interesting, like talking about Simeone there. I don't know if did you see the clips of him from the weekend when Conor Gallagher won 2 tackles in a row? It's if you haven't seen it, seek it out. It's so funny. Like Conor Gallagher does Conor Gallagher things. Like he wins 2 slide tackles in a row. And Simeone, I'm not exaggerating even the tiniest bit when I say he celebrated it like they just won a penalty shootout in a Champions League semi-final or something.
Jose Mourinho knee slide down the touchline.
He was turning around to the fans and he was leaping up and down. And I'm also thinking of the, we are going to get the Arteta celebration, where he, let's say, puts his hands in a suggestive area and gestures to the crowd. Lean into it. I like that. But the thing is, on sporting director, I definitely think it needs a fresh voice, needs someone from the outside now at this point. I don't know much about this guy at all. I mean, if he's worked with Simeone, he's worked with a strong character, to say the least, a guy who knows what he wants. But also, I had seen some suggestion that he was like a challenge to Simeone as well, and that's the interesting thing. I think this appointment, once we know the kind of a bit more about the character we've appointed, will show us like where the thinking is. You're always walking that line in any corporate structure where you want a good mix of friction and alignment. And that's such a difficult balance to strike, because you want enough friction for there to be, like a good kind of counterbalance of views. But you also need to be aligned. You can't just be slagging each other off all the time. But ultimately, with these things like sporting directors, it is impossible to tell until they start working for you, because these things, they're all about alignment of everyone in the puzzle. Like the sporting director is not going to be a guru who's going to do things, who's just going to do things on his own. It's how does he interrelate with Arteta? How does he interrelate with Josh Kroenke and Tim Lewis and Richard Garlick and all of that? Like it's like putting an executive structure together is like putting a football team together. You need balance of attributes, but you need complements within that. So I don't have a strong view on who it should be. And I also think that sometimes things can look great on, like I think the idea to have Raul and Sven Mislintat at the time, on paper, perfectly good idea on paper, but it didn't work because there are egos that clash and all of that. So there's just no way of knowing until they're all in the room, really. But I'm at least glad, and we've had noises in recent weeks that this is coming close. And I'm really glad it seems to be a big priority for them to get this done before the end of the season so that they're in place. And so hopefully we're not in the position Liverpool are in 2 years from now, where they're looking at, maybe if we're looking at a Premier League title, we'll look at it differently, but where they're not looking at their 3 best players walking out because 2 years ago there was a big backroom reshuffle and they took their eye off key contracts in particular, because the transfers of the summer, I'm certain that thinking's already happened and is already done. It's the contracts. That is the first KPI, I think, of this sporting director, those key contracts.
Yeah, and I mean, well, the problem is, I think, much like with a manager, there's sometimes this sense that a sporting director is a silver bullet and that they are responsible for everything that happens in terms of contracts and signings and things like that. These are organizations that are run as teams. And to your point, Richard Garlick is still in the room. Tim Lewis is still in the room. The Kroenkes are still in the room. There's a lot of people that are going to be involved in this. Mikel Arteta is still in the room. So he is not the figure. He is a figure in the power structure at Arsenal, will become one. I think it's also a reminder, too, that Arsenal continue to be a club that is excellent at, all of a sudden, operating in relative secrecy. And when you look at the short list that was put out a couple months ago when Edu left, and Eto'o and Ashworth, I guess, became a name on that list, and Olabe was on that list. I mean, Berta's name was not there until just a few days ago. So, it is a reminder that the club, just because we're not being briefed on things doesn't mean the club's not doing things. If you can have a sporting director candidate who appears basically out of thin air when no one knew that he was on the list, that's a reminder again that the club is doing things behind the scenes that we just aren't aware of. And so just because something's not being reported or not in the news doesn't mean it's not happening. Maybe a thing to keep in mind. We'll discuss Berta more, first of all, once he's signed. But as I said, I think on Wednesday we're going to have an episode on him on Patreon. And then tomorrow we'll have the Champions League power ranking. So before we get to the Champions League preview, Clive, just wanted to get your thoughts on the FA Cup weekend. I thought there was some sort of funny and interesting stuff that went on during the weekend. Obviously, Manchester United getting knocked out by Fulham on penalties. Xerxes took that very, very hard, by the way. It was inconsolable, which I thought was weird because I always feel like, and I get it, if you miss the final penalty, you feel like you lost the cup tie, but like he wasn't the only one who missed, by the way. Any thoughts from FA Cup weekend as you watched it?
Yeah, I can't be honest with you. I'm very, very one-eyed. I've just lost all enthusiasm about the FA Cup because we're not in it. I'm interested to see teams like Brighton do well, if anything. Brighton and just come through it. I'd like to see those sort of teams get a real bit of light, apart from the only light they get is finding players and then fleecing us for those players, right? So I think it'd be good to see them into the later parts of competition. But as for Man United, I'm looking at teams now like Man United. I'm looking at City. I'm looking at Spurs, Liverpool in particular, Villa, Newcastle, and I have to be honest with you, I'm not thinking about their progress in various competitions. I'm thinking about how they're going to rebuild. And I look at Man City and their rebuild's already started. Manchester United are firing dinner ladies, so their rebuild's got to go through a cost crunch. What they're going to do. I find watching United, watching young Cheeto run around, I've got to be honest with you, that sort of hurt my heart a little bit, watching that.
And in heaven, by the way.
Yeah, and so it hurts me. It hurts me because we did such a good job at the tail end to get not the same volume of players through like Chelsea, but when they do come through, they're of good quality, real high level. And so it's a real shame that we're not going to get to see them. I don't know the backstory, so I just have to wear it. You can't keep them all, but it just feels a shame, And
did you see Max Dowman at the weekend? Because that'll pick up your spirits.
I did see Max Dowman at the weekend, as did the whole world, no doubt. So I'm sure his daddy can barely get out of his driveway today for people tapping him on the shoulder. So that's going to be a challenge for the club going forward. I mean, there's no greater talent in Europe of his age than that young man. So let's just leave that one right there, right, and hope we can do our job. But yeah, I'm looking at Man City and I'm looking at what they're doing. They're slowly but building, building in the background. They've got a lot of young players all of a sudden that are growing. And we just need to do our job, Elliot. I've got to be honest with you. We've got to do our job. Spurs they've had a tough time, but they've blooded some young players. When they get their other players back, they can end the season in a much stronger position. So looking at them, I'm looking at other teams, and everyone's got better forwards than us. For one, everyone's got forwards. So that's a bit depressing. And then, but I'm also making sure that we are positioned for next year. On the FA Cup itself, I have views about where it is in the schedule. On weekends, for example, I'm not sure that should be the case. But that's very selfish, right? I like the Saturday. I like the third round on a weekend, but thereafter, I look at Europe. A lot of the cup competitions are in the week, and I have that view as well. But hey, that's very one-eyed and maybe top four centric, which I can be criticised for.
If there's going to be a Club World Cup, if there's going to be Champions League group phase or league phase games into January, the thing that's going to have to give is the League Cup. Having two domestic cup competitions isn't going to work, and maybe it's going to have to be a thing where if you are in the Champions League or the Europa League, you do not play the League Cup or something like that. There's going to have to be some kind of give and take with the fixture calendar there. I will say, sometimes I let myself down and I get caught up in narrative that I think is beneath me. And I don't want to be an excuse maker. And I definitely have been caught up in the narrative this season of, Liverpool play all the teams without their best players. Liverpool played Newcastle without Isak and played City without Haaland. And come on, Elliot, you're better than that. And then I watch Anthony Gordon get sent off this weekend, and now he's going to miss the League Cup final against Liverpool. It's like they never face anybody full strength. It's just absolutely incredible. Tim, that seeing Cheeto and Aiden Heaven play for Manchester United in the FA Cup was a bit of a weird experience. And then Max Dowman having a very visible, at least on social media, performance over the weekend where he played a through ball that was Fabregassian, I think you'd say, and then a a driving run up the pitch where he got fouled for a penalty. I think it is maybe a bit of a flashing red light that the next big danger moment for football is the poaching of academy talent and leveraging that part of the game where, because if you think about it, right, there's not much efficiency left in the main transfer market. Everybody knows the names, everybody knows the players, and if you want them, even a half decent player, you're going to 40 to 50 to 60 million. But look at Cheeto Obi Martin. If you're Manchester United and all you have to do is offer a kid 40,000 pounds a week and no transfer fee, even if it busts, the risk versus the risk on a transfer of Hoyland or Xerxes or anything like that is next to nothing. And I worry a little bit that these 14 and 15-year-old kids now are going to become the untapped market inefficiency that big clubs try to exploit because, and by the way, it's a smart thing because you could get 5 academy kids wrong before you have a cost that even comes close to one small transfer going wrong at senior level. So that's going to mean guys like Max Dowman are hard to keep. Ethan Winery, hard to keep. Cheeto and Aiden Heaven, hard to keep. And how do you manage it? Because here's the problem. If Arsenal had said, okay, Cheeto, we'll give you 50 grand a week to stay. What does Max Dowman want? What does Aiden Heaven want? What do all the next players? What did Ethan and Miles Lewis Skelly want? And suddenly you have huge wage inflation all the way down to 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds. Well, they can't get professional contracts, but you get my idea. My point is, I'm worried that that's going to become a really grotty, disgusting, exploited market before the regulations change around what can be done there. So what do you think when you watch Cheeto and Aiden Heaven playing for United and the future of sort of academy poaching?
Yeah. I mean, in essence, kind of already started, but I think there will be more focus on it with spending controls. Been talking a lot this week about just about football being broken. When Man United, the biggest revenue club in the world, are laying people off, like, it's not good. That's broken. Who's like, which team is not losing a lot of money? Villa are at 90% turnover on salary. And if they don't get in the Champions League this year, they might be in a lot of trouble. Again, like, that's not good. That is really, really not good. These are like, as much money as clubs are making, it's going out the door very, very quickly. And in this kind of spending controls era, and I've been reflecting on this, we're talking about PSR, like, oh, it's got to be expanded, it's got to be extended and all of that. Like, we're in a situation where we're saying losing £35 million a year isn't enough anymore. We need to lose more money to compete. It's not a healthy situation. And that's without taking into account like the pyramid and all of that. And like, yeah, you take away the League Cup, but then is that another precious like revenue supply line for the rest of the league and all of that? There are all of these questions, and the Women's Super League are voting on a resolution at the end of the season to potentially remove relegation for 4 years.
Yes, I saw that.
To try and consolidate, because a lot of these clubs are just losing so much money. So, like the academy, and particularly because of the academy kind of by accident has become this really lucrative thing, particularly in PSR. First of all, because investing in it doesn't count towards your losses, and second of all, because you're massively incentivized to sell those players as well. So there is definitely an edge to be had there. But obviously, like, clubs have a responsibility to these young men, like, young boys like Max Dowman. There's
15.
hundreds, thousands of like Twitter compilations going around. He's 15, and I can already see. Don't get me wrong; it's a very different ecosystem. But in Brazil, for example, what happens with young Brazilian players is pretty close to trafficking. In some cases, it's pretty close. Like, agents get hold of these players, they move them almost against their will. And obviously it's different because a lot of them come from economic circumstances of greater desperation and all of that, but it can get grotty pretty quickly. But also with Arsenal, I mean, we should reframe this as a bit of a positive, or a bit more of a positive from an Arsenal point, where we've got our best player came from Hale End. we've got Nwaneri and Lewis Skelly coming into the team, and now we're looking at like Max Dowman and all of that, and like how much money could that save us, and how much more competitive could that make us? But I also think with Max Dowman coming up at a time where there's a pretty steady production line there, and we've just had a couple of like a 17 and an 18-year-old come into the team. It's very easy to start conflating all these players and be like, oh, okay, Lewis Skelly and Nwaneri have come into the team and they're great. So obviously Max Dowman's going to come in now and be great. And it doesn't always work like that. I don't know if you guys remember Jermaine Pennant, for example. We signed him when he was 15 from Notts County. He'd just made his debut for Notts County. And like, I mean, he had a very decent professional career. Don't get me wrong, but he didn't go anywhere near where we thought he'd go. And, you know, I know he came from a slightly troubled background and perhaps had issues managing that attention. So it's a big job and a lot of responsibility for clubs. And it's a lot of pressure on families as well, because, you know, you might just have a kid who's a superstar at 15. And as a parent, I think there's no shame in saying that you might not be equipped to handle that. That's not something you really kind of bank on when you have a child, that, oh my God, my 15-year-old is like globally famous now. So there's a lot that goes into it that's, I say concerning, but there is like reason for concern. But at the same time, for Arsenal, I think there's great reason for positivity. And like even someone like Aidan Heaven, yeah, he looks like a good player. Even Obi Martin, but like our supply line looks so good at the moment that I think it's perhaps not made people forget those players, but made it a bit more forgiving. It's just like, okay, well, we've got a couple of Haalanders in the we've got 3 Haalanders in the team at the moment, and another one coming up on the rails, and for us that'll be a huge competitive advantage. Look at how Spurs were able to have one of the best 10-year periods in their history. Still didn't win anything, but like, how did they do it? Because they lucked out. I say they lucked out. Obviously, they had to do some good work as well, but they had a generational striker in their academy, and that took them pretty far for a while.
Yeah, that by itself. I mean, if all we got from our academy was Saka, we'd be very good for a while, for as long as we have Bukayo Saka. It is also getting more difficult to tell these kids to be patient, because they're blowing up on social media. They're getting attention that they never got before. You're seeing a 17-year-old is the best player at Barcelona. 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds are starting for Arsenal. And there is no sense that you have to wait. There's no sense you should wait. I think these players have an expectation of getting paid and being relevant at younger and younger ages, and social media is feeding that sense that they should, because they're becoming stars before their time. So, Clive, I don't want to concern troll, and I don't want to go too far on this, because I do want to talk mostly PSV the rest of the pod, but I at least want your thought on how this is going to, I think, transform football recruitment. And I think this is the next frontier of sort of underhanded club competition for these young academy talents.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid this is not new. I'm afraid this has been going on for many, many years, and it's a world I was a bit loath to comment on, because I'm not as current as I used to be. I used to be an academy parent, and I used to hear all the inside stories, etc. I'm not as current, but I can guess as finances have gone up, I don't think the stories have become less murky, shall we say? And it just depends what you want to believe and read. And hey, look, there are no secrets in the world. I've said it before. I live near Hitchin. There's a young lad that came out of Stevenage, went to Man City. I didn't even hear of him, and they've already spotted him as a 13-year-old and just like took him, you know. And I know my wife trains young footballers in athletics, and got people from this area going up to Newcastle, moving around. This stuff happens all of the time. Their talents are known, and they're sought after, and they move. I do think it's not saying it's a worry. I think it's something we have to be really careful about how we speak about, for me, because these are young minors that we're talking about. I went to see Max Dowman pre-season in to watch a non-league game, and I went just to see him. He was 14 at the time, and I thought, oh, crikey, what have we seen here? And I know I spoke to you guys offline about it, but until Mikel Arteta spoke about him, that was the time I felt I can now speak about him.
Yeah.
You know, because the kid's not even taking his exams till next summer. So we're talking, it looks good on the screen, we're talking a very, very, very young man. And you have to be careful. And what these kids will now want is they want not just payment, they want the pathway to playing. And the very best are going to get both. They've probably already got boot deals already. Right? So that's how it goes. And so, but really, the real riches are your ability, you must play. And so what they look at, if your first team recruitment is going to block you in 3 years' time and you're 15, 16, you're going to think, well, actually, they're not thinking about my pathway. And so our first team recruitment can be affected by the fact we got these young players coming through. And maybe that's what's happened a little bit this year. But no one cares. But would you rather see Ethan and Miles playing for another team? You know, Ethan was not a dead set signing. Right? So in that discussion, what were the promises that were made about his pathway? We don't know everything about the stories that are around there. So I'm really pleased we've got two. There's definitely one or two more coming up. There's another one that's quite clear to watch at the weekend. I won't mention his name because he's just only made his under 21 debut. And there's another one that, you know, I like the look of, that, you know, that can get there. And so it's really good to see this level of quality coming through. But I'm also really worried, Elliot, about the other side of things, right? And how people do get invested. If we were to lose somebody we really cared about, it'll become a measurement on the club.
Yeah.
And where the rules are not really in the clubs, don't really make it advantageous for us. Anyone can come along and take these players, right? Like we did for Cesc Fabregas. We took him, you know, and we all enjoyed it, didn't we? But we took him out of his hometown club, right? Nicholas Bentner, we took him. Those rules have changed. Now we can't continue to do that. But just so we can go and take people, other people can take people from us. So that's what worries me.
We'll have to see how it develops. I mean, you make a good point that this is nothing new. Like, I think the reason we're aware of it now is because we're more aware of academy players. 10 years ago, if Achito had shown up at United, we might not have known who Achito was or that he was a big talent. Or if Max Dowman had gone to City, we would, you know, at 14, we wouldn't have known. So it wouldn't have made big news. I mean, and it doesn't have to be the stars. Look what happened with Omari Hutchinson. Chelsea take him, and then they flip him for a big profit. You know, it was just basically a profit play for them. It's just that the contract situation doesn't exist in that age group to protect clubs and players. And so it is a really sort of open, chaotic environment for this kind of movement of players. And it's going to be one that's interesting. And I think the Max Dowman thing is a worry only in the sense that not that I'm worried about where he goes or what happens, but just he's so well known in Arsenal circles now at such a young age. I don't know if that's good for him, for us, for the club. I mean, the thing that is tough at these ages is the range of outcomes is still very wide. He could be the best player in the world. He could never make it at Premier League level. There may be some of you listening saying, Elliot, that's absolutely impossible. At 15, I mean, his body could develop badly. He could have knee issues due to growing pains. He could be 7 feet tall and suddenly not be able to play football anymore. There's stories about Kai Havertz grew an extra few inches in his late teens, early 20s, and it changed the whole mechanics of how he plays football. So the range of outcomes are huge, and we're putting so much pressure on these kids at young age. Final thought on this, Clive?
Yeah, the thing about the contract thing is an interesting one. I think that needs to change, but not just for Arsenal, because we can always go again. But if you're a smaller club and you find somebody, and then someone bigger comes along and steals them, and you get like a very small nominal fee, that doesn't really encourage teams to keep developing these talents. They should be compensated appropriately. You know, Manchester United have taken Aiden Heaven from us. So I think we might get £1.5 million. Well, I don't think that's right. You know, I don't think that's right. We should get more. We should get more money for that, and that's absolutely fine. Manchester United really believe in the kid. They should pay for him, you know, and pay for him properly. And so, or there should be something in the future around his future appearances or things like that. And I'm not sure about these deals anymore, Elliot, but I do think if you think about the whole game overall and how money should filter down the Premier League and down to the EFL, then I think, there should be real proper compensation. If we want to come along and take one of their star players, then we should pay. As simple as that. We're taking a kid out of Scotland just coming up shortly, and we should have to pay. That money in Scotland will go a long way in that league. If he's a talented player, then pay for him. And I think these rules need to be there to protect people.
Yeah, by the way, I mean, was it Brentford that got rid of their academy?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. I was around academies then, and it was a shock. All those players then went out to Fulham and they went to other places, and we sort of knew some of them, and it was a shock. But why did they do it? Because they weren't prepared to watch their players get poached. So what they did is they set up almost like a B team operation, where they then took good academy players that have fallen through the loop, give them highly competitive games, which you don't always get in academies, and then built up their value and then either into the first team or sold.
Yep.
And that told you everything that was wrong about the academy system, And so very smart. I think they've got the academy going now, I believe. But at the time, EPP came in and they did well to traverse it and thought, we're not wasting our resources, not wasting our money to prepare players for other teams. We're going to prepare players for ourselves. And I thought it was a really smart move.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one to watch. I think we should spend the rest of our time focusing on PSV. You okay with that, Tim? Or you have anything last to say on this?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So if we're going to do that, the only right thing to do then is a little palate cleanser here. And the best way to clean your palate is with Manscaped. Well, no, don't clean your palate with Manscaped. It's great for a lot of parts of your body, but I wouldn't put it in your mouth. Manscaped tools are the best. They're the best I've used. And spring cleaning isn't just for finally tossing that fedora you swore would make a comeback. It's for hitting reset on your grooming routine. That's what it says here. The Manscaped Beard and Balls bundle has you covered from cheek to cheeks, clearing out the overgrowth winter left behind. It's time to weed whack, hedge trim, and make sure the lawn is looking manicured for the season, because nothing says fresh start like a sharp beard and, more importantly, a properly landscaped lawn. Join over 12 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and use code ArsenalVision for 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. So what are you getting in the bundle? You get the Beard Hedger, which keeps your beard crisp like fresh bloomed flower, while the Lawnmower 5.0 clears out the underbrush. I think the Lawnmower is a great tool. I've said this before. As much as we joke about this and as silly as it sounds, if you're going to shave that area, shave it with something that actually works and is a good product. There's a dual blade system. It's skin safe technology. It works in the shower, which I think is the right place to do that. It's got a long-lasting battery, up to 60 minutes of runtime for the Beard Hedger and 75 minutes for the Lawnmower. So I rarely have to charge them. They're travel-friendly. The Beard Hedger has, I think, 20 different setting lengths with the flywheel. 20 adjustable settings on the Beard Hedger flywheel, so you can get to just the length you want. They're great products, and it's risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So don't cut corners on your grooming routine. Upgrade to the Beard and Balls bundle from Manscaped. Visit manscaped.com and use code ArsenalVision to get 20% off free shipping. Manscaped.com, promo code ArsenalVision, 20% off free shipping. Do it now. And NordVPN. Pretty simple, right? NordVPN is an app. You put it on your phone, you put it on your tablet, you put it on your computer, you click where you want to browse, and you can watch geo-locked videos. You can watch streaming videos where the episodes come out a day earlier or a month earlier or a year earlier. You can watch match reviews of the day program. You can watch your football when you're out of the country. So when I'm in the UK, I can watch the 3 p.m. kickoffs because I just go back to my Peacock streaming service thing, and we watch it. In fact, one of my great memories was being at a pub in Islington with a bunch of Arsenal supporters, and we watched Fulham beat United thanks to a late Iwobi winner because I had the NordVPN thing on my phone. You also have threat protection, which for people that are occasionally on dodgy streams, which is usually football supporters, it keeps you safe. So nordvpn.com/ArsenalVision, you get a phenomenal deal. You get huge discount off your Nord plan and 4 additional months on top. It's completely risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. So it's nordvpn.com/ArsenalVision. That's nordvpn.com/ArsenalVision. And finally, Indeed is the hiring site that saves you time, that gets you better candidates, that helps you hire fast. I just cannot emphasize this strongly enough. The idea that you should be putting job postings on multiple sites and then managing multiple sites does not make any sense. According to Indeed data, sponsored job posts directly on Indeed have 45% more applications. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page, so you get relevant candidates right away. You don't have to manage all the different websites. I mean, your time is valuable and you are trying to find the best candidate. And so Indeed helps you get the best candidates faster with less time spent managing multiple job sites. So there's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners to this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ArsenalVision. Just go to Indeed.com/ArsenalVision right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/ArsenalVision in terms of just apply hiring. Indeed's all you need, Clive. Is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Got it. Tim, let's say you were a PSV supporter.
Okay, I can get there.
You're laying in bed. You can't sleep.
I can definitely get there.
You can't sleep. You can't sleep. You're trying. You're tossing and turning. You just want one comfortable night of sleep. The big game's coming up. It's a day away. Arsenal are coming to your beloved stadium in Eindhoven. But you can't sleep because you know that Mikel Merino, number 9, is going to be there terrorizing your backline. How do you sleep at night, PSV fans? Tell me, Tim, how do you sleep at night knowing Mikel Merino is there to torment your every moment on the pitch as Arsenal's number 9?
Relatively soundly.
Touche. Yeah, all right. All kidding aside, what the hell do we do with our lineup for PSV game?
Yeah, I've said this on the last couple of pods. I think we should play Merino, but not as number 9. I think we should have like a false 9 partnership, if you want to call it that. Play Trossard through the middle and have Merino kind of go in behind him. And perhaps when we generate some of those crosses, because Merino, you don't want Merino with his back to goal. You don't want him just standing there. You want him running start into the box, getting into the area. You don't want him standing there trying to vaguely get his head on things. You want both the goal, certainly the second goal he scores at Leicester, he runs onto it. Those are midfielder goals he scored against Leicester, I think. And so I think trying to find a way to harness the threat that he usually creates from midfield with perhaps a more withdrawn striker like Trossard, maybe even Sterling, if you want to do it that way, and play him there. Perhaps, perhaps you have more luck there. Perhaps we don't want Raheem Sterling trying to dribble past people, trying to accelerate past people anymore when he can't really do it. Perhaps he'll be better as a false 9, perhaps getting his back to goal, because he doesn't have any issues like controlling the ball and passing it, as far as I can see. What I can see he's lost is that burst to get past players. But actually, if you play him as a false 9, maybe he doesn't need to do that. Maybe he comes short, keeps it nice and tidy, and I could see him doing that. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I think that's definitely the answer, but I think it's worth a look, at least. So I think Merino coming from deeper has to be part of it because, as a midfielder, he generates a lot of threat, a lot of XG. But as a striker, we've not seen that, and I don't blame him at all. And he doesn't really know. Like he's not an elite like passer and link play anyway. His like that whole role, as far as I can see, the left 8 role is a bit off the ball. Win your duels, get in the box type thing. And I think he's good at that. And actually the striker role doesn't ask you to do that as much. And he just doesn't look like he knows where to stand, which is a completely reasonable conundrum for him to find himself in. Because I don't think it's almost like, when you get a good fullback and everyone goes, oh, we should play on the wing. And it's like, yeah, but fullback, you're running from deeper, you're running onto the ball, you've got less attention. I think it's exactly the same being an attacking midfielder to a striker. So, yeah, I either Trossard false 9 with or Sterling false 9 with Merino behind him. I don't think we've got a lot of other choice than that. I guess hopefully Calafiori won't get a booking, although like PSV have got some real threats on the break, and we are going to have to be very cognizant of that. They got some really kind of explosive wide players, but Calafiori doing that chaos role as well. I'd like to see that for a full game rather than it having to stop on 45 minutes. But, I mean, we don't have a lot of other choices, do we, really?
No, Clive, are we thinking about this the wrong way, though? There's no way goals rule anymore. Is the biggest goal at this point get out of Eindhoven with a 0 for PSV? And, hopefully we score, of course. But is thinking about the striker the wrong approach? Is the real thing here keep a clean sheet in Eindhoven and just get this tie back to the Emirates where we have a chance to win it at home?
Where we can play our striker.
Who will not exist then either.
Yeah, I was doing some walking this weekend thinking about what's informing my decisions and where I arrive, right? And let's be honest, if Havertz and Jesus are not available, the next person we play at false nine is Trossard every single time. So we'd all agree on that. Why am I not forcing Trossard into false nine? Because the one time I really wanted to play well as false nine was against Leicester, and he didn't play well and played much better on left-hand side. So I've moved him in my mind straight away. You play left. Should we persist with Trossard as a false nine? I don't really mind who's number 8. But then think about what we do on the left-hand side. And this is where maybe a player like Zinchenko could do a job on the left-hand side. I think he's better on the ball. Around Calafiori, and they could have double fullback on one side. Could do that. Could potentially, and I just think that gives us something of the norm. We have somebody in the middle of the pitch that understands where the goal is and can maybe get some shots off. But we're really scraping. I can't remember the last time Trossard scored, right? Odegaard's only scored a couple of goals this year. And so when Odegaard was injured, we moved to a system of Havertz and Trossard down the middle as double false nines. But we had Saka and Martinelli out wide. And so they became forward so we could still threaten. We got a 17-year-old out wide. And so we're really challenged here. We're really challenged. So I do think having almost like a team of midfielders, which we've got no choice because that's what we have, a team of facilitators and midfielders that play in an Arsenal way like we did against Forest. We didn't threaten the goal a lot, but that could be enough for this first leg to make sure that we are combined, hard-working and solid, but then take the chances that are presented to us, and we didn't really take them against Forest. I don't see an option at the moment in wide areas. That's the worry for me. Sterling is not there at the level, in my opinion. I do think players like Zinchenko, Calafiori, I do think they are at the level. Tierney can end games at the level. Ben White can end games at this level, no problem at all. And I think he'll have a part to play in this game and the game against Manchester United. And maybe our strongest, fittest team, Ben White and Timber plays. Timber plays on the left and Ben White plays on the right, right? And you can see that happening down the road, right? So I'm not against that at all. But we just need to build this up slowly, one by one. You're interested to see if Arteta creates new units and does he try to cut and paste how we always play it onto this group, or does he do something else? And I don't mean like flip systems, but you have to create combinations of what's been consistent is the pods he uses and how they play, and what's the makeup of those pods. And simple things like a simple instruction, like once we pass the ball in wide areas, 1-2, but then we run in behind. Who's making that run? Have you got the ability to run in behind? Calafiori can, Zinchenko can. He's a ball to feet player. Trossard can, but doesn't want to do it. So I do think we need to threaten the back line. So those players really need to be in this team. If you don't threaten the back line, you're going to be in trouble. And then you're going to be watching Bakayoko, Noah Lang, Perisic playing wide areas, and you'll be watching the ball go over to De Jong in the middle of the goal, and you'll be worried. You have to set people back. So that's the number one thing I want to see, and the players will select themselves. But can you run behind and threaten their back line to make them feel they're in a really strong contest with us having some form of offense?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. If you look at PSV's league form, I think they're a very strong attacking force in the Eredivisie. I think they have 73 league goals. Is that right? I want to say 73, 76, something like that. So let me see. Eredivisie.
We know all their attackers. That's a sign, isn't it? We know the names.
Yeah.
That's a worry.
Yeah, 73 goals. To be fair, they've got a 34-year-old striker. We can't ask Raheem Sterling to score a goal. He's 30 years old, man. Come on, this guy's 34.
He's much more in. They kind of do that Nottingham Forest thing where they have De Jong up front doing his Chris Wood bits, and they've got speed around and outside him, and that's But we nullified that against Forest. But I think the thing we should really point out is their home record is so strong. They haven't lost at home in over 2 years. 58 games unbeaten at home. I don't know if that's changed. That was certainly the case a week or two ago. So and look, we went there last season, so there's an advantage in that.
Was that a draw, Tim, there last
It
season?
was.
It was a dead rubber, though.
But it was edgy, though, wasn't it? It wasn't like it was a draw. Was it a draw?
It was a 1-1, but it was a dead rubber. It was our last group phase game.
Eddie Nketiah set up by Reece Nelson to score the goal.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, neither of those guys available for us. But and the crowd's going to be really on top. The other part of it as well, which is maybe this is a strange thing to mention, it's Carnival in Eindhoven. And I've been there because Arsenal have played there so many bloody times. I have been there when it's been Carnival when we played there in February 2007 and we lost 1-0. And so the whole town, like most of the Arsenal fans, one of the reasons I'm not going, first of all, the flight's like £500, ruinously expensive. There's also not many places to stay in Eindhoven at the moment because it's Carnival. So the entire town is going to be drinking all day. Right, and it's already a pretty raucous place. So, we're in for a hot atmosphere. And I took loads of photos last year before kickoff because, I've been to like watch Arsenal in Turkey and Italy, and it's up there with that in terms of the pyro and all of that. And the first half could barely see anything, so much bloody smoke around, because of the kind of pyrotechnics. It's going to be a hot atmosphere. And I watched them play against Juve. And like that crowd dragged them through because I don't know if you saw that game in extra time. They all had cramp, but it was kind of that the crowd were a bit like, if any of you go down, I mean, first of all, the vibration, the sound in the crowd probably get you up pretty quickly. But also that's going to be a real factor. Like I'd bite your hand off for a draw and to turn the home game into a one-off. I really would.
Let me ask you something then, Clive. Does that give you pause about Nwaneri? The idea of starting without Nwaneri seems absurd to even suggest. But going into an absolute cauldron away in the knockout rounds of the Champions League at 17 years old is a big thing. And we already know he cramps up around 45 minutes anyway. Is there a party that says, you know what, I'm going to leave him on the bench. I'll let him absorb that atmosphere from the bench. And I'll bring him on at 60 minutes where he can go full tilt and influence the game. I mean, and I'm going to ask Sterling to, like, because 0-0 is, you don't want 0-0, but it's fine. I'm going to ask Sterling, who's at least got the experience of playing in the biggest games in Europe, to go hold the fort down on the right-hand side of our front line for an hour or 55 minutes or whatever it is, so that I can bring Ethan on late, tired defenders, an explosive player they're not ready for, and save him a little bit from being exposed to that atmosphere right from the start.
It is a good discussion, Elliot, but personally, I just don't feel it at the moment. We have 3 games in a week, don't we? We've got Man United the weekend.
United away, yeah.
And then PSV at home next week. And
then Chelsea, I want to say. And
yeah,
doesn't get
these 3
easier.
games are the key ones, right? So, and Ethan's going to play in all of them. He just won't play all of the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, right? And that's where we are right now. We don't have the depth at the moment. I'm all for these double fullbacks on either side. I like, White behind Timber, for example, and Timber being more progressive, and Calafiori and Miles playing on one side, or Zinchenko. I'm all for that. We have these players.
Do you think you could move Timber left and start Timber and White just to have more experience and more defensive nous out on the pitch and protect the 18? Because I'm saying protect Ethan. Miles is only 18,
Yeah, exactly. And he could well do. And we just
He's been
don't
sent
know
off
enough.
twice already.
Yeah, we just don't know enough about on White yet, But again, we've got 3 games in a week. He's going to play, isn't he? He's going to play, and that's the important thing. We can make that judgment. If he's shining in training, he's looking super sharp, he may start, and then we go from there. Because Bakayoko is a lefty that plays on the right, and he comes inside. At the weekend, he started, and Noah Lang didn't start, and Perisic started on the other side. Now, Noah Lang came on at half-time-ish, so which one of the 2 of the 3 are going to start? Right, so but I remember Bakayoko playing against Kivio, and I was really impressed with him. He's really explosive. I fancy Timber to take him, no problem. He's the best matchup, but we don't know who's going to start the game. So yeah, let's have to wait and see. I think the most important thing is we play with the spirit we played at Forest. That's the key thing. We played with real spirit, determination, and dominate that game. If we bring that level to this game, I think it could be enough. I really do. But we have to play that same level of intensity and care. And you can tell the club think it's a big game because the big man Josh is over, right? So this is a big game for the club. And he doesn't pop over for the small ones, right? So this is a big game for the club. It's a big moment in our season. It's a big week in our season. And these are players who have to take us there. And they're refreshed. There's no excuses. They've had plenty of time off. Let's see what we can produce.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the people are going to hate this, but they hate a lot of my opinions. So why stop there? I think I probably wouldn't start Lewis Skelly or Winery. I think I'd start Timber at left back and White at right back. I think 0-0 for an hour is absolutely not only fine, it's probably what we want. We know we're not going to be free scoring. That's just not going to happen. We don't have the players to be free scoring right now. We don't. Ethan is a 45 to 55 minute player with the emotion, the cramp. He's got United at the weekend. We've got PSV at home where I would want him to start. Let Sterling tuck in next to White, make sure we're not exposed. I would go with Leo, on the left, and probably Marino up front again because you just don't have many options. And I would just try to keep it relatively tight. I think we can win the midfield areas. Possess the ball where possible. Don't leave yourself open to counterattacks. Mazlou Skelly coming off, obviously getting sent off for that error he made, exposed in space, which, again, I mean, it can happen to anyone, but it is what it is. I would just say this is a chance to play these seasoned, experienced professionals. And when Eric can come on at 60 minutes and maybe, just maybe, against slightly tiring legs that haven't seen us attacking much, Ethan does something no one's expecting and can win you the game because he has that kind of talent in his boots. And then he can play against United at Old Trafford, and he can play at home with the huge support we're going to get a week from now. But you protect the 17 and 18-year-olds. We've gotten so used to them starting because they are good, and they are, let me be clear, this is not a doubt of their talent. They're both talented enough that they should be in our starting 11. But there is a time for protecting your young players. And in this environment, and with Timber and White both fit, I assume White is fit to start. If he's not, that changes things. Maybe you are focusing on spending an hour keeping this one tight, Tim, at 0-0, and not overextending your teenagers who are going to play 3 very big games in a week if you're starting them in this environment.
100%, completely agree, actually. And then we got Chelsea after the second leg, like the next block of 4 games. They're all big games, and Nwaneri can't start all of them. And ultimately, even if he does, like, the most we can really get is 60 minutes. So I think it makes a ton of sense to say, well, actually, do we want him for the last half an hour? And I also think for Lewis Skelly, this perhaps because of like Calafiori being quite a big forward threat, this might just be a good time to just take the brakes put the brakes on for Lewis Skelly a little bit, and just be like, okay, there's been a lot swirling around you in recent weeks. Like, let's calm this down a bit. Let's have until the international break. Let's have Calafiori in the team. He's a bigger goal threat. And, we paid 50 million for him. Like, it shouldn't be any surprise for him to be playing, and just let's take the heat out of this a little bit for you. And, maybe work on your game a little bit more, completely like ordinary stuff. But I'm with you. There's a value to having something or someone coming off the bench. I'd rather have Nwaneri coming off the bench than Sterling at the moment. Sterling, at the very least, I think a competent footballer, not much of a threat in behind anymore, but like a competent guy who's played so many of these games. There was an interesting article from Jonathan Wilson in The Guardian. He was talking about like the 500, when you hit the 500 game mark, you talk about the age curve a lot. And don't get me wrong, that is a thing that exists. There are no 50-year-olds playing in the Premier League, but Jonathan Wilson was kind of talking about actually a lot of players, when they hit that 500 game mark, that's when you tend to see the decline, and Sterling went over it, I think, over the last year or so. So, but at the very least, he's played a ton of these games before, and this is a game where 0-0 is fine as well. basically. So I'm all, you know, when I say contain, I don't mean let's play a deep block and put 10 behind the ball and hope for a point, but you know, just play a little bit sensibly. And I guess to learn something from last year as well. Do you remember how we conceded that goal in Porto last year? I mean, you guys were there, like 90th minute, trying a cross-field ball, none of that. You know, if it's 0-0 in the 90th minute, good. That's a good result. Great, take it. So I think, particularly because you've got a second leg at home to come, if there's any game in this block that, you know, we can afford to be without one of our bigger attacking threats in one area, it's probably this one. So yeah, I think that'd be a good idea, actually.
Yeah, and to your point about them being excellent at home, I will just point out they beat Liverpool at home, but that was a dead rubber for Liverpool where they played, I mean, absolutely no one. Jadon Dan started, Chiesa started. Like, it was not a real Liverpool team. They won 3-2. They have drawn at home to Utrecht, Willem II, AZ Alkmaar, Sporting. They've lost away to Juve twice. They lost to Brest, who just got 10-0'd by PSG. They've lost to something called Go Ahead Eagles. So I'm not trying to do them down. I'm just saying that, like, it may be the case where you do just try to bring this back to the Emirates at 0-0. And Clive, we can go back and forth on the lineup time and time again. Again, my preference wouldn't be Calafiori either. If Timber and White are both fit, I'd start both of them just for the defensive solidity. And I adore Calafiori long-term, but that's what I do. I don't think he will, by the way. I think he will probably start Miles Lewis-Skelly and Ethan Nwaneri, frankly. But in terms of the importance of this, we've said this before, but I just want to get your take on it. I believe that as a fan base, and I'm not speaking for fans, I'm just saying what I interpret, that if we stay second roughly this season, and we finish roughly second, even a distant second, that people will, even if they don't feel it now, even if there's anger now, when the summer rolls around, I think there will be an appreciation that we had the kind of season where you're just not going to achieve your big goals with the injuries you had. I think people will tolerate that. I somehow feel that getting eliminated by PSV would not fall into that bucket. And there has been some question about our performance in cups and in European cups and things like that under Mikel. So I feel like if you get past PSV and you get knocked out by Real Madrid and you don't win the league because you had all these injuries, people will reset in the summer and understand why we fell short. But I don't think they'll have that same understanding in this tie. So how monumental do you see this in terms of this project and this moment and this weird season we're having to get past PSV as kind of a minimum bar we need to jump over so that things don't turn too negative?
Yeah, last 8 is par, isn't it, for this club? And let's be honest, I was thinking semi-finals minimum if we were all healthy. That's what I was thinking. We were third favourites for the tournament when we were healthy. So that tells you what everyone was thinking. So I don't feel like third favourites anymore, you know, and not if we're talking about playing 4 fullbacks and Mikel Merino at centre forward, and that's what I'm thinking about right now. So that's
you don't
not
think that'll
really
put the fear into Real Madrid? No?
Well, to get my Tim Stillman head on, when we last got to the Champions League final, we had a dysfunctional defence then as well, didn't we? We had Matthew Family playing at left back, Senderos playing
right back.
Yeah, and we didn't concede a goal, I believe, till the final, something like that. So yeah, when you're here, Tim, I just turn into you every now and again. Just pop out.
Do you remember that guy Thierry Henry though? I feel like that might have been. He might be useful right now.
Thierry Marino, that was the one you mean? Yeah.
Same thing.
So yeah, that was the way we did it, and so we can definitely lean into that again. I think last 8 is par, right? So we have to get there. This project will be defined by the next thing that we do. It's as simple as that. We have reached a point in our cycle where we need to renew people's thought processes, renew our expectations. We all expected to do a little bit better this season. It was all on track. From the moment Declan Rice got sent off, it felt strange to me this season. It felt like we were targeted. I don't think I didn't handle the emotional red cards. The City one, I didn't like it. I didn't feel good about it. And it just felt like we were rocking and rocking. Odegaard never gets injured. We saw him take a kick against Brighton. He goes off in national duty. We lose him for 10 games. That sort of stuff. And he's not been back to form. This is the stuff that we have to get better at, making decisions for us that make that put us first. It's really important. But maybe we would just do this after 3 years of improving our points total. I think it's 4-3 on the trot would have been. And suddenly now we hit some rocky roads and we have to handle it. So our project will be defined by next things that we do. And that is it. It is simple. That's why many people excited today when they saw the tweet about our potential sporting director. It's the next thing that we do and how that looks and feels. That will define. If we roll out the same thought processes with the same people, it won't work. It won't work. People are already challenging the club, challenging the people in the club they want to blame, and they'll soon get bored if we do the same things, right? So we have to refresh, we have to reset, we have to renew. And I'm quite excited about it. But to do that, we have to do it from a position of strength. We have to be in the Champions League. We have to finish in the first 2 places. And for me, we have to get to the last 8 of the Champions League minimum and see what happens, right? So, and there are many people with their fingers hanging over that Madrid flight, right? Don't want to click it just yet, but it's just floating over the cursor, right? And they want to book it. So, and so it's very important that we don't disappoint people who want to go to Madrid like me, Elliot.
Yeah. Look, I think it is massive. By the way, you mentioned the refereeing decisions this year. Let's spare a thought for England's quote-unquote best referee not being able to tell that Jean-Philippe Mateta had his head kicked off by a goalkeeper and needed VAR to get his red card out for that. I mean, it gives me no pleasure to see Mateta get hurt. It was terrible, but it gives me some pleasure to see people finally catching on to Michael Oliver, just not being up to it. But yeah, not a good moment there. Tim, anything to add to Clive's thoughts on the importance of this tie and how I think sentiment may forgive falling short of our goals this season based on, I would say, factors outside of our control. But at the risk of speaking for other people, I do not think the sentiment would be as forgiving if we don't get through this tie.
No, and that would be reasonable, even given, and also because a lot of people, the source of their disappointment is the fact that we didn't make ourselves stronger in January, and it's very difficult to argue with those people, isn't it?
It doesn't help that Villa have 2 loanees that are playing very, very well for them. 2 players we could have potentially gotten, and then Kolo Muani's tearing things up. So yeah, it's not great.
Yeah. So. And that's like, what do you say to that argument? There's not really anything you can say to it, is there? So, and I'm sure Mikel Arteta knows that and thinks that, but yeah, like this really does feel defining. Even if we because like last season, like a lot of title challenges have been built off the back of not really being in the running that much. So like 2001, the title was done on April the 18th, right? Man United won it. We went and won the double the next season. Last season, look at Liverpool. Liverpool completely fell away last season, but it didn't stop them getting a good run up to this season. So, like, I kind of think, finishing like a distant second needn't be like damaging for next season, but. And it's not just about the fans, is it, Elliot, as well? Like, again, we're trying to get players to renew contracts and things like that. And that's going to be one of the prizes they're going to have their eye on. And so it's no exaggeration to say this is really season defining because there's nothing else really. Like the domestic cups have both gone. And this is kind of it. This is what you get kind of excited about in the season. And I think like going out to Madrid, like in the quarter-final, if we get there, I think people would forgive that, right? As long as it's not like 10-2 on aggregate like it was at Bayern all those years ago. If we go and give Madrid a good go, I think 90-odd% of Arsenal fans would be like, fine, Real Madrid always win it. We don't have a right to go and think that we should be beating them, and they're so experienced at this level. And I also just think having those moments, having that moment in the stadium, because the Champions League games so far, frankly, have been a bit of a non-event. I've actually only been at one of them. I've been at one of the Champions League home games. A lot of that's schedule, really clashing with the women's team and that, but I'm not the only one who hasn't been to all 4 because they just, I'm sorry, they don't feel like events at all. And, PSV at home's going to be a nervy one, I think, probably a bit like Porto. really you're looking at Real Madrid quarterfinal, even Atletico Madrid quarterfinal. That would be like, okay, this feels like a Champions League game. Like, sorry, Shakhtar. Maybe in hindsight, the PSG result looks much, much better. Shakhtar, Monaco, Dinamo Zagreb. Sorry to you guys, that could have been a Europa League group, but there's something about having that like glamour tie, and it reminds me a bit of the year. And don't get me wrong, this was very funny, but the year Spurs pipped us to the Champions League, and then the next year they got a really crap group. That could have been a Europa League group, and then they just went out, I think AC Milan or something in the last 16, and all their supporters were like, it's like we weren't in the Champions League at all. There is something about needing and wanting like that big tie, that big where everyone's in the ground an hour before kickoff and there's flags and pyrotechnics and all that, because we haven't had that yet, and if you don't get it, it does kind of feel like you haven't really been in the competition yet. And I think that's crucial to the way we feel. And it just like it extends the meaning of the season on into April, which if we go out, it's not going to feel like that, is it?
No, exactly. Clive, if I offer you 0-0 tomorrow, are you taking it?
Well, no. As we're sitting here trying to be wise men, thinking, I'll take it. Of course I would. When that kickoff starts, me, and the ball starts rolling across the grass, I'm thinking we're going to win 3-0, and that's just the way it goes, right? So they have a shot. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'll take 0-0. I just want to see us set up with the right intent to play, really. That's it for me. When I don't want to see things, I don't want to see West Ham again, put it that way. I don't want to see that. That's where I am. And I want to see Arsenal playing properly. And if we play properly, we're a good side. We got a lot of talent. And it'll come to the fore. We're really good around the pitch. We can move. We're quite physical. We know what we're doing. We know our principles. We're a good side. We just lost a bit of attacking trust and faith. And at the moment, it feels like we can't score a goal. As soon as we score one, the team will lift. And someone said something to me today. He said, we're going to score. He said, don't worry about it. All of these players, for all of their lives, have been playing football to do one thing, and that's to score a goal. They've all scored, every one of them. They'll score again. I thought it's a simple message I got, but I thought, you know what? Yeah, they all want to do that. They all want this. They want this more than us. You know what I mean? They want this more than us. And if we get those goals, we know what to do. We know how to manage the situation. So I'm hopeful that the dry patch will come to an end and we'll just go through this game because we're way better than them. I watched them play Juventus. I thought they're quite fortunate to get past Juventus. I'll be much more worried about that game. But let's just see what happens this one, and let's make sure that we're in the tie for definite by the time we come back to the Emirates.
Look, I don't want to draw a true final line under this, but since beating City 5-1, we scored 0 at Newcastle, 0 home to West Ham, 0 at Nottingham Forest, and at Leicester, the second worst defense in the league, we were on 0 until late in the game when Mikel Merino popped up with that brace. So I'd take 0 at PSV and try to figure it out in the home leg, as long as they're at 0. It is simply the case that scoring goals is going to be a problem for us for the rest of this season, even if Bukayo Saka comes back and Martinelli comes back. Martinelli will come back. Saka, that's more touch and go, I think. I think he'll be back. I think he may be back later than anyone anticipates, is my thinking on that. But we'll see. And it certainly depends, right? If there's a glamour tie against Real Madrid, there may be a return for Bukayo Saka sooner, and if not, there may not. So we'll see. Tim, any final thoughts on your expectation for tomorrow?
To watch it from behind the sofa, for it to be if it goes well for us, it's going to be a terrible watch, I'm afraid.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I mean, if it's going the way we want it to go, it'll be the boringest game of the round.
It's probably going to be like, Clive, I don't know if you remember these games, but like when we won the Cup Winners' Cup, like Torino away, drew 0-0, stunk the place out, went to PSG, 1-1, stunk it out. Like, that was kind of
the final, mate.
Yeah. Absolutely. Everyone was talking about Zola, Asprilla, Brolin, and we were like,
we
no,
sorted
mate.
that out.
So
we give you Steve Bold.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we're going to have to stink the place out for it to be a good night. And you know what? I'm here for it.
Yeah, I think lean into that identity for now. And it's funny in a way, to your point about watching it from behind the sofa. If we draw Real Madrid in the next round, if we get through and draw Real Madrid, given all our injuries, I'm going to see it as a free hit. Now, if you're saying that's a terrible mentality, fine. I'm just telling you my truth. I'll see it as a free hit. Trying to play Real Madrid with Mikel Merino up front, to me, is a free hit. So I won't be as nervous as this one, where I feel existentially in my bones, we have to get past PSV to keep things moving in the right direction. So we'll see. We will have a Champions League power rankings tomorrow on Patreon. We'll have an instant reaction tomorrow on Patreon. Tim will be here for that, which is a rare treat. We will have a special pod on Wednesday about our potentially new director of football from an expert on the topic. We'll have a main pod on Thursday, and we'll have who knows what on Friday. Maybe we'll have a rewatch of the 7-0 Arsenal victory tomorrow.
I'm working on another Arsenal history pod. Whether
there you go.
Whether I'll be able to land it by Friday, I'm not sure. But we'll do something else in that series pretty soon.
Yeah, actually, you know what? I think we might have a director of football pod, not an actual director of football, but a director of football pod lined up with Scott, actually, too, who wants his chance in the director of football chair, like Phil got it a week ago. So lots of stuff to get you through this week. We had the reset over the weekend. I got to sing karaoke, and that's all I need to refresh my spirit. I don't know what fuels you, but that's what fuels me. So we'll leave it there. Clive, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Thanks, everybody. You can block me everywhere at all the places. We love you, and we'll talk to you after Arsenal 10, PSV 0.